Now here's the question that should keep us up awake at night. What patterns are we following? Jeroboam set in place a pattern. Zimri followed that pattern. Do we have patterns in our lives that lead us to sin? No, we do. What ways are we walking in? Because the truth is, we are following someone's example. We are either following the example of the world or we're following the example of Christ. We can't follow them both. Let's turn to our Bibles to 1 Kings. As soon as it comes up here. Now, I don't know about you, but throughout my life, especially in the best of my marriage, we like to go on vacation. And we'll go on vacation for a week. So you figure this out. So a lot of times we'll go someplace that's a little bit farther away. So you take 2 days basically of travel. We stay overnight. We travel for 7 to 8 hours, which is getting harder and harder for me to do. And we stay at a hotel, and the next day we travel like 4 or 5 hours to get to our place. So you get there, and you have to unpack the car, okay? And you unpack the car, and then you got to figure out, okay, we got to get groceries, because we stay in a condo. So we got to get groceries. So you go to the grocery store, you figure out what your groceries are going to be. So maybe by the third day of being there, you're finally in vacation mode. Third day. So the third day, you start planning out what you're going to do. And you go a couple places, you do a couple things, you relax. The fourth day, it's great. The fifth day, you're like, we got to start packing again. The sixth day, you get everything packed up. You're closing up. You're getting ready to leave. And on the seventh day, you go. It just seems like vacations are too short. Now, we are lucky. We have a condo where about every 7 years we get 2 weeks. So we'll go for 2 weeks, and we're like, wow, this is weird. We're not having to stop after 4 days, after finally settling in after 4 days and actually leave. But it seems 7 days seems like a very short time in order to feel refreshed. Now, can you imagine becoming the most powerful person in the kingdom? All that you went through in order to get to that point, only to lose it all, including your life, in just 7 days. Not 7 years, not 7 months. In 7 days, the king we're going to look at, Zimri, he was king for 7 days. I mean, that's barely enough time when you start a new job, even to get acclimated to it, to really understand what you're doing in your job, let alone to understand the whole kingdom and be able to make the changes you think need to happen. I mean, we look at our current president, and everybody's talking about the first 100 days, and he didn't accomplish enough, or he accomplished too much, or in the first 100 days. Could you imagine 7 days? Yet in those short 7 days, this king's choices created a legacy that's going to echo throughout history. And this is a warning for all the generations to come. As I said, his name was Zimri, and chances are, up until this moment, or actually last week's sermon, I did mention him, if you heard it. Up until that time, you've probably never even heard of Zimri. I really hadn't. I haven't really studied the kings. I mean, I've read through it, but who remembers the name Zimri? It kind of flows and goes away. But we're going to see him climb the corporate ladder. Basically the ruling ladder. His story is very relevant to us today, more than we might think. See, we live in a world that is obsessed with power. our political system is obsessed with what you can get people to do and what you can do. And we talk about those that are in power, and we really know it's probably not the people we see. You know, our Congress is probably not the ones in real power. There's a power behind them. But we live in this world where getting ahead is important. We do it at any cost. We see people climbing, chasing political positions, accumulating huge amounts of wealth and influence. Social media feeds our need, this need for this constant stream of wanting to be seeing people who've made it, celebrities, influencers, as they call them on social media. But here's what's fascinating for me. The Bible's going to give us this incredible account of a man who seized power. He seized the throne of the northern tribes of Israel, and he had everything. He was king for 1 week. Why does that matter? Why does a seven-day king matter to us? Because his short reign reveals to us some very profound truths, number one, about human nature and about the choices we make and how we think nobody is watching us, but about how God sees everything. We have to ask ourselves some very uncomfortable questions. What are we willing to do to get ahead? How far are we willing to go to get what we want? How quickly can that success actually become a disaster? And even more importantly, what happens when we try to build our lives on something other than Christ? Now, you might think this is just some ancient story, but let me challenge you with this. Zimri's story isn't about a king who lived some 3,000 years ago. It's about you and me. It's about the 7 days or the 7 minutes or the 7 seconds when we are faced with a choice on what we are going to do. Who are we and what do we believe? So we're going to unpack this, a very dramatic, the most dramatic and probably the shortest reign of any king in biblical history. And we're going to discover how this ancient story points us towards the only king who never fails us. The only king who offers us something that's going to last far longer than 7 days. So let's go to 1 Kings chapter 16, verse 15. It says, "In the 27th year of Asa, king of Judah, Zimri reigned 7 days in Tirzah. Now the troops were encamped against Gibbethon, which belonged to the Philistines. And the troops who were encamped heard it said, 'Zimri has conspired, and he has killed the king.' Zimri was head of the chariots. He killed the king. Omri was head of the army, and Omri was appointed king by the army itself." So now we have two things. We have Zimri, who kills the king and decides to take over. He's in another town. The commander of the army, Omri, is fighting the Philistines. They find out that Zimri is up there, has now made himself king, and instead, what does the military do? They do a military coup, and they make Omri king over Israel that day in the camp. So Omri went up from Gibbethon, and all Israel with him, and they besieged Tirzah. And when Zimri saw that the city was taken, he went into the citadel of the king's house and burned the king's house over him with fire and died. Because of his sins that he committed, doing evil in the sight of the Lord, walking in the way of Jeroboam, and for his sin which he committed, making Israel to sin. Now the rest of the acts of Zimri and the conspiracy that he made, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the Kings of Israel? This was not just the end of Zimri's political career, as short as it was. This wasn't just a military defeat. What actually happened was the inevitable collision between human rebellion and divine justice. I want you to look at the scene. Zimri. He's barricaded in the royal palace. He knows his days are numbered. He took the kingdom by killing the king. So much so, he's so scared that he decides to kill himself, and the flames that he lit are beginning to lick the walls. And in those final moments of his life, you might wonder what's going through his mind. I mean, was he thinking about all the choices he made? All the choices he made that led him to this spot? Was he thinking about what could have been, what should have been? Was he considering the trail of blood and betrayal that brought him to this moment of complete desperation? See, this is the terrible reality of sin. Sin always costs us more than we expect to pay. Zimri looked out and saw that the city was being captured. So he went to the palace, placed a fire there, and he died. We might ask, why? Why did he do this? Why was this happening? It had only been 7 days. The man wasn't even given a chance, was he? Well, the problem was that his sin that he had been committing long before he was even king was following him. And then those 7 days while he was king, he didn't change his ways. Because we see in verse 19, it says, because of his sins that he committed, doing evil in the sight of the Lord, walking in the way of Jeroboam, and for his sin which he committed, making Israel to sin. Because of what Zimri had done, because of the sins he had committed, even before he was king, what was happening was he was being punished by God for those sins. And worse than that, not only did he sin, he caused others to sin. He had everything for 7 days, absolute power, unlimited resources, a kingdom at his fingertips. He had everything he could want. But his sin still followed him. That's the deception that sin puts in our lives. We think, if I sin over here, it will not affect over here. The reality is, sin does not just affect one part of our lives, it affects everything. It's that fire that burns and it doesn't stop burning. Sin is like a cancer working through your body, eating it alive. But he had that cancer long before he was king. This moment in life, his moment of change where he became king, was that moment he could have changed his ways. But he didn't. He kept following in the same ways he had before. Sin had a hold of him. And when judgment came, it took a lot more than his crown. It took his life. Sin doesn't just affect us in the moment that we sin. It creates a pattern that eventually what it does is it destroys everything we touch. Sin promises us power. It promises us joy. It promises us satisfaction. The reality is that sin never satisfies. It is always hungry. And while it may promise us many things, in reality, what it's going to give us is destruction. Look at the garden. Adam and Eve. Satan says, did God say that you cannot eat of any tree in the garden? Wise serpent. He didn't ask them a direct question. He's going around the bush, around the tree, as the case may be. He says, no. They said, no. Eve says, no. We can eat of any tree in the garden, but not this one, or we will surely die. In fact, we can't even touch it, which is not what God said, by the way. The serpent says, you won't die. You'll be like God. And you know what? He wasn't necessarily lying, like flat out. He was telling a white lie, a small lie. Would they die at that moment? No. Would they die? Oh, yeah. They're going to die physically, and they're going to die spiritually. That's what sin does. It lies to us. It tells us we can have everything and leaves us with nothing. This is what James says about sin and about temptation. In James 1:15, he says, then desire, when it has conceived, gives birth to sin. And sin, when it is fully grown, brings forth death. Zimri's short race is a perfect picture of the promise of sin and its devastation that it brings in our lives. But even more tragic is that sin does not just destroy us. It literally burns everything around us. Look, Zimri, he's in the capital. He's in the citadel. What does he do? He starts a fire in the citadel. Not only did he destroy his own life, he destroyed the center of government. Not to mention all the lives of all the people that he destroyed. And after this, the nation is in chaos. That's what sin does. It causes chaos in our life. It doesn't stay contained like the fire in my fireplace stays contained. There have been a few times where I've been stoking it, opening it, and a little flame will jump out. And what do? I'm like, boom, I'm trying to put it out. I don't want that fire anyway, even though we have tile on the floor. I don't want fire outside of that firebox. Sin spreads like wildfire, destroying not just our own lives, but the lives of those around us.